Well, hey YouTube, it's Petey. It's been a long day, so you gotta forgive me if I'm a little grumpy. This video we're gonna be talking about buffers. So there's a lot to learn, and I'm wrong about everything. Don't listen to Petey. For my own personal game, the only reason I'm making this video, hey Petey, if you need a buffer, don't mess around. You have to use the through hole 2N5457. I didn't have good luck with this layout. Uh, if you can afford the space, use the 10x6, go with the TLO 72 or the Klon buffer with the TLO 72. I think that's a 12x8. Or if you really need to make it small, go with this 8x7 and use your through hole 2N5457. That's the point of this whole video. This here is the layout that I had the luck with, that worked well for me. I've never had good luck with this layout here, but I'm more partial to J201s. The Klon buffer, let's see, there's this 12x8 TLO 71 version. Then there's this, which is 12x7. This is a more readily available or common, in my opinion. And again, I'm a complete goof. So if you can afford it, afford the space, this is what I would go with. So today I built 3 of these, and I built them with J201 daughter boards, and none of them worked for me. So you're saying, what's a daughter board? Well, that's this little board here. This is the JFET itself, okay? Now, normally a JFET looks like just a regular transistor, you know, and there's goofy stuff with the pinouts. With these, I bought these special 90 mounting clips. So you buy the clips, you buy the board, and then you buy the actual JFET. You solder it on here, and then Bob's your uncle. You know, it's a converter to use this new SMT in a through hole type package. So if you're going to be looking for these, you should go to Delyk, Delyk. He sells these for 60 cents. And you get like 4 for 60 cents or something. It's ridiculous how cheap he sells them for. Everyone else is like a lot. It's like $1 for one. For the green board. Because then you need to get the JFET, and then you need to get you can just use whatever scrap pins you have, but I like these fancy clips. And then you have this hardware down here, so it's like, it's kind of an investment. Now, why would you need a buffer? Well, this goes back to, pretend you have your guitar, and then you have your amp, and you plug in a 3-foot cable. Well, what are you going to hear? Well, it's going to be real crisp and clean, a lot of treble. All your signal's going to be there because it's a short cable. Well, let's say somebody steals your 3-foot cable and all you have is a 300-foot cable. So what are you going to hear? Well, it's going to sound like somebody put a wet blanket on your amp, because for every inch of that cable, you lose a little bit of signal. And by signal, I mean treble and volume. So it's going to be dull. And that's not good. So they call this tone suck. It should be called treble suck, but they call it tone suck. And when we have a pedal board, you have a bunch of pedals with little cables. Every one of those cables going into the jack, you know, it's not soldered. It's like kind of press fit together, like these connections are just touching. So in between each one of those, you lose a little bit. And this all adds up. So on a professional pedal board setup, how they do it, they'll have a buffer on the input and a buffer on the output. Everything in between, you don't necessarily need buffers, but like when you buy a Boss pedal or a Digitech pedal, any like store-bought pedal that's not true bypass, true bypass doesn't have buffers. And if you have a bunch of true bypass pedals, you need to have a buffer in front and in the back. But it gets complicated. You know, like if you have the buffer in front, well, that compensates for your cable. And then, you know, your guitar cable, your long cable with 15, 25 foot performance cable, compensates for that, and then you have all the additional little plugs in between, so that buffer is working both ways. And it's not like a boost pedal where you click on this buffer and it's going to give you endless sustain and a bunch of gain and dirt. It just brings it up like 3 dBs, just a little bit. It gives you that clarity back that you would have like if you used a short 3-foot cable going right into your amp. Now, pros, properly set up pedal board will have an input buffer and an output. And a lot of guys, they don't even think about this because the way they would naturally build their pedal board, well, they have a Boss tuner or whatever store-bought tuner. You don't see people making DIY tuners, true bypass tuner. Although a lot of the cheap chap ones are true bypass, which is like, then you need a buffer, you know? So it's a fact of life. And then when there's layouts for buffers that I can't get to work, it begins to get to be a topic where I need to make a video about it. Because I've found myself going back to that same layout and getting screwed by it over and over. And I know it's my own fault for not using the right transistor, but they're rare. Those 2N5447, 2N5457, they're not exactly easy to come by. And I'm in the process of converting over everything to J201 SMT tiny version on those daughter boards. So it's like I need to remind myself, hey dummy, if you're going to be making buffers, either make them with the proper through-hole 2N5457 design, that bottom layout that works, or go with the op-amp version if you can afford the space. Don't build it into a tiny pedal. Get a bigger box that can fit all that stuff that you need in there. You know, like for the input side, you know, you wouldn't necessarily need 2 buffers in something like this. I would just put one in the input. But like I said, pro pedal boards, the guys will have an input buffer usually in their tuner, and then on the output they'll have like a fancy Strymon delay that's buffered, or some Boss RV10. So today I woke up thinking about a problem I had, and I was like, I actually got a couple problems right now, and I've had this before. I built 3 of those buffers, that one layout that I showed you, and none of them worked. So I rebuilt it and found that the bottom layout was the one that worked for me. This one didn't work using the J201. 3 of them didn't work, which is frustrating. And this 8x7 layout here with the extra 10K resistor, or a pair of 10K resistors extra, this is the one that worked. I think it's got a voltage divider there. So what I'm saying, this video is for the future me. If you're going to play around with buffers, you know, either go with the op-amp version or use the proper transistor, proper FET. And these get goofy because they have weird pinouts and they sell fake ones. So it's really kind of a complicated thing. And I had to build 3 because I had one issue with my rig for my guitar, and then I had another issue with a noise synth that I had built. Hey, Gomti, could you hand me that Newt K-Sook? So the Newt K-Sook is a noise, I shouldn't call it a synth, but I will just for this video. It has 2 oscillators. One of the oscillators has 3 oscillators, and the other is a single. This is the Newt K-Sook. It's got kind of a lot going on. There's some switches and some controls and some jacks on it. And when you open it up, you can get a better look at what's going on. There is a mixer in here. The mixer is the AMZ mini mixer, which comes in 3 different layouts. There's a 2-channel AMZ mini mixer. There's a 4-channel AMZ mini mixer. Then there's the version that has the buffers. Now, buffer is when we have impedance. And like you can take your multimeter, set it to ohms, plug it into your output or your input of whatever device, and it will read the impedance. And a lot of pro music gear wants to see low impedance. High impedance is bad. That's that. When I was telling you, if you had your amp and your guitar and you had a 3-foot cable, that would be low impedance. If you had a 300-foot cable, that would be high. It would be impeding, like putting the brakes on that tone, like putting that wet blanket on there. So that a lot of resistance caused by these devices that people make, like the DIY guys, they print these, they upload these layouts. Hey, build this pedal. And it's super high impedance because the store-bought version comes with a input and output buffer. But they're like, hey, you don't need that. You only need one at the beginning, at the end of your chain. But if you don't know this and you build that pedal like a big muff, horrible, horrible problems. You'll turn the gain up and it'll squeal, it'll feedback, like when you're not playing. You're going to stop playing for a minute. I guess some people just never stop playing. Like when they build those LM386 amps, there's such horrible artifacts on the release of every note, and people love them. Oh, I built my amp. Oh, did you? Well, I stop playing sometimes. It sounds like ass when you do, because all the artifacts on the release of the note. Same thing with these high impedance circuits, and for me, I think, I must have done something wrong. I got a cold solder joint, or there's some flux in there I didn't clean off, and I'll be troubleshooting it and freaking out. And then eventually I'll come to realize that I've fixed everything. There's nothing wrong with it. That it ding, 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 the bell goes off. See how that works? And it's an impedance issue. So I'll grab a Boss pedal and put it in front of it, and all of a sudden, there's no more interference, there's no more crackling, there's no more weird popping sounds and noise, and on top of it, I can turn the gain up past halfway and it doesn't howl. So this is something that it should be lesson number 2 after use flux. It's like, welcome to the club of DIY. Bend over. Because we're not going to tell you what you need to know. Anyway, that's why I'm here. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm going to keep talking. The Nutke Souk, I built the AMZ mini mixer, which is a 2-channel mixer. There's a 4-channel layout for it that you can get, and then there's another one where they have the buffered version, where there's a buffer on each input channel. Now, the guy who designed it, Jack Orman, he probably, in the original article, he said, like, this is designed for low impedance loads, and if you feed it a bunch of high impedance garbage signal, it's going to have problems. Well, where I went to get the layout to build it was not Jack Orman, it was the Vero layout page. And those guys never mention anything about it. They assume that you know. So there's a lot of assuming going on. That's kind of where I'm coming in here. These 2 different oscillators, one has 3, one has 1. I built the mixer and I fed the outputs of each into these mixers. Well, what I found was, let's say I had the first set of 3 up halfway. Turn the volume up halfway on the mixer. And I have the second oscillator all the way down. Well, then I got those 3 oscillators playing a chord, and then I want to blend in this other oscillator to be on top of that, play a melody. Well, as soon as I would bring it in, the other 3 volume would drop. And it's like, on a real mixer, that doesn't happen. If you bring up the drums and they're playing, and then you bring up the bass, the drums don't drop down 8 dBs. So I'm thinking, I'm feeding it a bunch of high impedance signals. And what do I need to do? Well, I need to cut in a pair of buffers, one for each, in front of each channel of the amp. And this is how we solve impedance mismatching issues, is with buffers. And that's why I'm talking about this, because it's not something that's very commonly talked about. It's kind of a hush-hush secret for pros, techs, and experts to whisper about. And this layout, I never got to work. I had nothing but grief with this fucking layout. It's probably my fault. I probably should have used the through-hole 2N5457s, but again, they're not readily available. They're very difficult to get. They're expensive. They're super rare and getting rarer. And of course, I'm sure I'm wrong about all this, so someone's going to come in here and correct me. I use the J201 with the daughter board, which is a whole nother can of worms. I bought a bunch of that stuff so I could solve this problem. And then it's like, when I build this circuit here with the J201, it doesn't work. The signal going, if I bypass this, all of a sudden it's brighter and louder. And then when I run it through here, it's quieter and more muffled. So I don't know if that was some kind of user error, but I built 3 of them today, and all 3 of them didn't work right. 2 of them did the same thing, and 1 of them was acting goofy. So I quickly rebuilt the buffer with the proper part using this layout. So what I would say to my future self is, don't screw around. Try to get more of these if you can. I'm sure I could probably get them from Mauser or DigiKey. I'm sure they're available. They're just probably a little bit more money than some of the cheaper suppliers that I normally get it from. And that's a little bit more of a better layout. I mean, 8x7. A space is always a premium, you know. So perhaps what I need to do is go back, get some more of these. Or just build one, you know, maybe tomorrow. What I could do is build another one of these and build it with the proper part. Don't use the SMD daughter board, and see if this works. So maybe I made this video prematurely. And as far as we went over the Newt case Souk and that impedance mismatching, the other issue that I was having, the reason I built this is, how long have we been going here? 17 minutes? Jeez. This is a booster. It's a ZVEX super hard on booster that you can bypass, but the input has a buffer on it that you can't bypass. That's always on. So the idea with this is I write most of my songs on a Fender Stratocaster, and it's got single coils. Now when I play, say I have herniated discs, so I like to use this Steinberger Spirit because it's small and lightweight. It doesn't hurt my back. If I'm reclining here, I can play that Strat sitting pretty good and it doesn't hurt me as bad. Now, a lot of times when I'm playing these songs back, I miss the Strat. If it's a clean tone with a Fender style amp with a spring reverb and I play that humbucker guitar, it's just not the same. So when we play live, I began to bring my Strat, and certain songs I'll switch over to the Strat. Now I've programmed my multi-effector with the humbucker guitar, and I've got stuff like noise gates set up for thresholds and sensitivity, that when I switch from the higher output humbuckers to the lower output Strat, the end of my notes is getting cut off. So I looked it up, and people are using the TC Electronics Spark Clean Boost pedal, which is a really cool, excellent pedal. It's got like a fat switch for the bass and then a treble switch and then the gain button, gain knob, and it's just a clean boost. Then there's the Seymour Duncan pickup booster, the EP booster, the Echoplex booster, or the people even use the old ZVEX super hard on the show. So I had all the parts to build the show, and special thanks to my good dear friend Pink Shimmy Photon, which I have to mention. He sent me these PCBs. Thank you so much. I went and looked all of them up today to figure out what they were, and I found one of his posts where he said that he had built a Big Muff that had all kinds of noise issues, that it was howling when he turned the gain up. And the same thing happened to me when I built the Big Muff, and I realized, you know what? I never had a buffer in front of it. So if you build a Big Muff and it's howling, that's because you need a buffer. The same thing happened to me with, like I tried using shielded cable. There's this trick where you shield the input wire, but you only connect one end of the ground, and you run a regular ground wire in between. So that way, whatever hash comes in on that antenna, your hot side hits that shielding, but it doesn't get all into the circuit because you only connect one end of the ground. It's a really weird trick that astronaut taught me, and it worked on a JFET based high gain pedal that he built called the Spitfire. But it didn't work on the Big Muff that I built. And I also built a Marshall Governor, which was even worse. This Governor made all kinds of racket and noise. And then I found out from reading other people's experience, you just need to have a buffer in front of it. So it's like this type of thing. You see, oh, there's this Marshall Governor, people love it. It's this great pedal. It's got a 3-band EQ, gain and volume. It sounds like such a cool pedal for me. I bet it'll end up being my cherished dirt box. I buy it, I get the PCB, order the parts, order the pots, the enclosure, build it. It's a whole huge thing. It takes all this time, and then it's making all this racket, making all this noise and squealing. And I'm like, oh, I did something wrong. So then I'm troubleshooting, I'm freaking out. And then I finally, eventually, after I run out of my options of troubleshooting, I realize, hey, it needs a buffer. I put a Boss pedal in front of it, and then it becomes this even better pedal than I ever could have dreamed. And it's dead silent. That angers me. Like, somebody should have told me this. So that's why I made this video. Like I said, Pinkster had mentioned he built this Stifler's Mom, and it's a Big Muff with a 3-band EQ in place of the regular Big Muff tone stack, which is kind of bullshit. And he was like, this fucking thing is unbelievable, but it howls when you turn it all the way up. And I was like, dude, I wonder if he tried. And maybe he did. I hate to come on here and be like, oh, dude, I figured it out for you. I know more than you. Because this took me fucking 10 years to learn this. Plus. So I hope this video was helpful to you. Like I said, my initial idea was to use a larger chassis and have a 3-band EQ with a clean booster and the buffer. And then I was like, you know what? I'm not going to want to bend over and tweak an EQ in between switching. Like I'm in such a hurry at the remotes when we're playing live. Like it's a lot for me to ask to just step on a pedal. And ideally, I want this thing to be small, not have a power jack, to have another power supply to run. Or it's all batteries. So that's why I built this the way I built it. It's a ZVEC super hard-on with JFET buffer that you can't bypass. So that'll take care of any impedance issues. And this will be like a toolbox pedal. Like if I build something and it's making noise or whatever, I can just grab this. And I built a buffer and I put it in a plastic chassis years ago when I first started this. I built this buffer and I put it in a plastic chassis. It's like, you dummy. You know, like the next thing that I want to do is get a 1590A, build a buffer in it where it's just battery powered with an LED and not even an LED. You just plug it in and plug it out, and there's a buffer in it. That's all it does. That's the next thing I'm going to want to do. But I've got this one built. I hope I was able to explain that to where it makes some sense to you guys. Super special thanks to Picture Photon. It was so cool I was able to build this. I think this is going to do it for me. I think this is going to work like magic. And if it doesn't, I can always replace the the super hard on or the buffer. I've got the, I can figure this out. I can figure it out. But if this sounds like something you'd be interested in, I would be more than willing to make one of these. I think it would be about $75 or $100 at least, considering the amount of time I had to put in. When I prefer to do it in a 125B, which just gives you a little bit more room this way. It's a little taller, about the same size, but just gives you a little bit more room. And the interesting thing about the ZVEX Show is that it does give you a little grip when you crank it. So there's a mod where you can do a second volume pot on it. I bypassed that. This thing is set up to have 2 pots. I just wanted it to have 1. So there's always that. And I'm pretty sure this is going to do the trick, because really all it should be is just a boost to go from a Strat after a humbucker, right? Just a clean boost. That's all you need. Anyway, you guys, I hope this one made sense. I refilmed it many times to try to get it shorter, and I was unable to. So thank you for putting up with me. Sorry it was so long. It's 10 years of beating my head up against the wall, and I'm ashamed because it's a 26-minute video. All right, you guys, try to take care of yourselves. Try to stay cool. Take care of yourselves. Hug your pets, and peace.